So can we talk about the difference between a side hustle and a full-fledged business? Because they have a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences.
Yeah, and our industry is really kind of unique in that you can actually have a side hustle. A lot of industries like plumbing and electrical, you have to have licenses, so it kind of makes a side hustle a little more difficult, if not impossible, just because of the cost up front to get licenses and time and everything. You have to be more dedicated. So our industry is a little mix of that and a little mix of people, on social media selling gummies or all kinds of different stuff where it's just a side hustle and extra income for you and your family. So we have both in our industry. We have full-fledged businesses that are 7-figure, 8-figure businesses. And then we have people just doing it for extra income on the side. So so there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just what you want to do.
There are examples though of businesses that start as side hustles and grow into businesses because you kind of have to dip your toes into it and keep working the day job.
It's a great way to get started.
Yeah.
It really is. The challenge of starting that way is analyzing your cost and your value that you're providing the customer and charging what you need to charge to become a full business and support a little bit more infrastructure than you have as a side hustle. And I always equate it to like an Uber, right? So there are people that do Uber as a side hustle. Mm-hmm. There are people that do Uber as a full business. If you're doing it as a side hustle, my guess is that you are not probably counting your car as an expense.
Sure.
Right? If you're doing it as a full business, you are definitely counting your car as an expense because you're going to have to get a new car at some point because you wore it out, right? So that's kind of the equivalent to any business, really, as far as going from a side hustle to a full-time scalable business. And side hustles allow you to come in at an entry point that's a little less expensive, get some experience, and then after you've gained that experience, even if you remain a side hustle, I would recommend even increasing your price because your value has increased because of your knowledge and your experience that you've gained. As well as if you ever do want to turn it into a real business, now you've got that a little bit more income that you can support the structure that's required to provide more value to your customers effectively.
Yeah. Side hustle by definition means that you're doing it on the side of something else. You have another day job. Yeah. There's a safety net. Becoming a business really means taking on some risk that if this fails, you don't have your safety net. So, but then you reap the benefits if it works out, which hopefully it does for everyone, of you can grow beyond your salary at a normal job. So there has to be kind of a leap of faith moment there.
There is.
Where you jump from side hustle to business.
Yeah, and really the risk that you take on, the reward for that is that once you grow and hire employees and start providing more and more value for your customers, you're getting the revenue, the profits from those other employees that are now working for you. So as a side hustle, you're only getting what you can do as income or profit. And once you hire more employees, you're getting what you can do plus the income that they're providing as well. So on top of that.
I will say, I mean, I've had many side hustles over the years, and you work 12-hour days. I mean, you work all the time because if you started a business and you're running it as a business, you can do 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or whatever because you're running a business. But if you're working a full-time job, usually that means your weekends are eaten up with your side hustle. So you're working twice as much.
Weekends,
nights, which makes it tough.
Yeah, and the nice part about the side hustle is if you can manage starting that way, A, you get some experience. B, you can start saving money, so you can start hiring other people without eating into that income that if you left your job and just started point blank cold turkey, right, with no income at all, then you've got to really go pretty hard, unless you have savings from somewhere else. But the nice thing about starting from a side hustle is you get that benefit of, hey, you can put that cash away potentially to grow to start an actual true business.
Sure. With the safety net, without all the risk, growing your brand and everything?
You know, one of the things that I quit my job, my full-time job, from a conversation that I had with a guy in a car, and he was an entrepreneur. We were driving to dinner. I was in a peer group, and we were driving to dinner. It was he and I, and I was asking him, I said, because I was thinking about starting my own thing or whatever, and I said, how did you decide to do it? How did you make the jump? And he said, oh, it was super easy. He said, I looked myself in the mirror, and I said, what's my worst case scenario? And he said, my worst case scenario was doing what I was doing. I could always go back. I could always go back and do what I was doing. Yeah. And that day mentally, it took me a couple months, but that day mentally, I literally quit my job. But that's kind of the same thing, right? It's like, everybody talks about all this risk and all this, what's the worst case scenario, right? Yeah. Now, if you have upfront capital you got to put out or anything, that's definitely risk. But if this is a fairly labor intensive industry, right? So you're mostly selling labor. Yep. And so there's not much capital out up front, which is a very nice way to get started in anything. And so if you look at yourself and say, what's my worst case scenario? It's probably not as bad as you think.
No, if you're living your worst case scenario, then that's also something to look at. But
the way he said it.
Oh yeah, no, it's true.
It hit me right in the face. Yeah. Right. It was like, he literally was like, he was working for, I remember to this day, he was working for Anderson Consulting, which is now called Accenture, I think. Sure. But that tells you how old I am. But he was working for Anderson Consulting, and he said, yeah, I could always go back doing what I was doing. I could get hired by, I've got the experience. I could get hired by them again, or I could get hired by other firms. And his worst case scenario was literally, he's like, I was living in an apartment. I was working for, he's like, my worst case scenario wasn't bad at all. It was exactly where I was.
No, and I mean, this is like cliche, city here, but it's like, you're not going to hit home runs if you don't step up to bat. Yeah. I mean, really, if you don't try. And, I watch all the business YouTube videos, as so do, many people watching this do. And there's a whole thing now, which this could be a whole nother conversation though, about whole generation of business owners retiring. So if maybe a, landscape business, service industry business, the owner is 65, 70 and retiring, you can do owner financed purchase from them, and that's less risk right there. There's ways to do this.
Yeah, you bring a list of customers with you.
Yeah, and that's less risky than just starting at ground zero. So I don't know. And you also hear again cliches, but there's no right time to do it. It's just got to be now.
Right. You got to make the jump.
You got to make the jump. So going back to what you said about hearing about your transition from, being in the workforce to starting your own thing. Yeah. What was that first day of hanging your shingle? What was that like?
Probably riskier than most. So I told my wife I was quitting my job. She was, I don't remember how far along, but she was pregnant with our second kid. Okay. Yeah. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea.
Yeah, okay.
So I quit, and they wanted me to stay on for a few months, which I did, which worked out both ways. And I just started looking around and seeing what I was going to do. But I knew I was I'll tell my age. I was 38, I believe, at the time. And I just had this internal feeling that if I didn't do it now, I was never going to do it. I literally said to myself, if I don't do this now, I think I'm going to retire where I'm working. And do I want to be, my thought process was, do I want to be 80 years old and say, I never even tried? Yeah, and exactly. I was not going to do that. So I did it.
And 38, coming up on 40, to me, that's like, there's something about those numbers of, I got to try now, which isn't really true. I mean, you could do it whenever.
You can do it when you're 65. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's something too. I mean, maybe people are watching this and they're in a position where they're thinking, I'm too old for this. There's no truth to that. Right. I mean, maybe it's even better if you're a little older because I'd say if you're older, you have more knowledge. But if you're younger, you're more naive and you don't know what
Yeah, I think any age,
Any age is
there's
good.
pros and cons, and like you said, you just got to do it.
Yeah. All right. Actionable first steps. Someone is working a full-time job, doesn't have a side hustle. What are some recommendations they can do to start their side hustle? Is it coming up with a name, figuring out what business they want to be in, start calling people? What's the first thing they should do?
Yeah, the beauty of today and with all the social media and all, there are so many ways to start a business with very little cost. I mean, look at how many people are starting businesses on social media that are selling walking treadmills and cameras, and you can start a business selling anything today. Affiliate programs, which we talk about.
Sure.
You can literally start a business doing anything, and with not much upfront cost.
No.
So, I think look at I think one of the mistakes everybody makes is, well, do what you're passionate about. Well, maybe.
Yeah.
And let's take Jeff Bezos for an example. Like, he started the business and he wasn't passionate about books. He looked at books because he said, that's got the biggest problem. Right? And I can solve that bigger problem. All these bookstores have massive amounts of inventory. Yeah. There's more book titles than anything else in the world. Yeah. You can't possibly store them all. But if I could and online was, it was like 1994. It was like online was just coming to be a thing. And his goal was to solve a problem, and he was passionate about solving a problem, not necessarily about books. Yeah. Right? And so it depends on what your passion is, but your passion can be solving problems or helping customers, and then you can do anything.
Yeah. I think too, if you try something and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean, well, I failed, I need to give up. Try something else and take the lessons from your first attempt and be able to pivot, come up with something new, because odds are it won't be exactly what you start out with.
So let's talk about failure in the next episode, 'cause that's a good one.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about with failing. Tons. So, okay. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Find us at havenlighting.com and on all the social platforms. And we'll see you on the next video.